Do you know who this Chief Justice is? The answer is probably no. This is John Rutledge. He was the second Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He was born in Charleston, South Carolina on September 17, 1739. His father was John Rutledge, a physician, while his mother was Sarah Hex, a housewife. He was homeschooled for the first part of his life by his father, then by an Anglican priest. He continued his education in England, where he studied in the law school, Middle Temple, and after 3 years, he returned to South Carolina to begin his career in both the political and legal direction. He was a successful lawyer and judge, and also a well-off plantation owner. He married Elizabeth Grimp on May 1, 1763, and had 10 children together. He was chosen as a delegate for South Carolina in the Stamp Act Congress and Continental Congress. In 1775, he helped write the Constitution for South Carolina and also was a signer. He was one of the authors of the U.S. Constitution at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. George Washington appointed him in the Supreme Court. He served as an Associate Justice and then as a Chief Justice. During his time as a Chief Justice, he served on the cases United States v. Peters and the Talbot v. Jansen, both in 1795. His time in the Chief Justice was shortened because the Senate denied his nomination because of his strong opinions towards the Jay Treaty. As a result, from no longer being Chief Justice, he attempted suicide but failed. An interesting fact was that he was a spy for the colonies because he had much insight on Great Britain and it helped the colonies have an advantage. Now, on July 18, 1800, John Rutledge passed away at the age of 60 in Charleston, South Carolina, and is buried in a cemetery next to where he gave his career-ending speech that cost him his Chief Justice position because he voiced his opinions on the Jay Treaty.
Plessy v. Ferguson was a case that made it known that it was constitutional for races to remain separate in the United States. After the Civil War, the United States tried to reconstruct after slavery. The United States government created the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to outlaw slavery, guarantee colored citizens the same treatment under the law, and the right to vote. The South was very resistant when it came to integrating races, so they began to make segregation laws known as Jim Crow laws. In 1892, Homer Plessy was taking a trip on the railways through Louisiana. He bought a ticket and sat in the coach that was for white passengers only. Plessy, who was 7/8 black and 1/8 white, refused to go to the Jim Crow coach when instructed to. Plessy was thrown off of the train and was sent to jail for violating the Louisiana law. This 1890 state law said that Louisiana railways were required to have equal but separate coaches for white and black passengers, and that anybody who refused to sit in their assigned coach would potentially be fined or imprisoned. Homer Plessy argued that because he was 7/8 white, he was a white man and deserved to sit in the same cart as the other white passengers. Under Louisiana law, Plessy was not considered white. He was put on trial for breaking the law of sitting in the wrong coach. Once going to trial in the state of Louisiana, Ferguson argued that it was unconstitutional, but the government of Louisiana did not agree with him. Judge Ferguson agreed with the government. Plessy, unhappy with the decision, asked the Louisiana Supreme Court to issue a writ of prohibition against Judge Ferguson to prevent him from enforcing the law. After reviewing the case, the Louisiana Supreme Court found the law to be constitutional. Plessy requested a writ of error from the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court reviewed the case to determine whether the Louisiana law was unconstitutional or not. Justice Brown concluded that the law did not violate the 14th Amendment, saying that the amendment was designed to make everyone equal under the law but was not intended to eliminate distinctions based on race. So therefore, segregation of facilities was not violating the Equal Protection Clause if they were separate but equal. the court determined that laws requiring segregation could be legitimate if they were reasonable and acted upon good faith. The court believed that in this case, Louisiana was respecting the fact that the two races wanted to remain segregated. In other words, saying that it was not the law's power or job to force the races to mix. Many people believe that once the case got to the U.S. Supreme Court that they completely ignored the 13th Amendment issue. But in this case, the court declared that the 13th Amendment was in no way involved because it had nothing to do with involuntary serving or slavery. When it came to the ruling of the Plessy v. Ferguson case, the United States Supreme Court stood by the Louisiana Supreme Court original decision of saying that it was not unconstitutional. The historic ruling of the 1896 case Plessy v. Ferguson was eventually overruled with the ruling of the 1954 Brown v. Education.